Next, I would like to bring up Deb Kramlich. She is a UNE faculty member from the School of Nursing and Population Health. Come on up.
Great, thank you. The critical care environment is a bit like the ocean, with changing currents, sometimes smooth sailing on calm seas, and other times waves threatening to capsize the ship. Our vulnerable patients, like a ship's passengers, rely on a great crew to keep them from crashing. I'll never forget one of those patients, probably the sickest I've ever cared for. For privacy's sake, I will just describe them as an adult in the prime of their life. Their support person was a sibling very close in age, and they loved adventure. The patient had a chronic illness that never prevented them from their favorite activity, deep sea fishing, but did leave them vulnerable to infection. Unfortunately, what landed them in the critical care unit was an infection that most of us are able to fight off with antibiotics at home. They quickly became so ill that they needed every form of life support. People in this situation are like the Maine weather. Wait a minute and it will change. And that's even scarier when you're out on the open seas. That was true for this person. 1 minute they would be treading water, albeit supported by a life jacket in the form of machines and medications. The next, they would be close to going under. Unlike Maine weather, though, there often isn't a calm after the storm passes, as this condition more often than not ends in death. When you've worked in critical care as long as I had, you feel like you have a pretty solid idea of when to push forward with life support and when to pull back. And usually the team is in agreement, including the patient's family. This patient definitely knocked me off that rock of certainty and left me feeling like I was in shifting sand. When they entered the unit, they made it very clear that they wanted everything done to save them at all costs, and they made their sibling promise that they would uphold their wishes. While that isn't unusual, decisions often change if a patient continues to deteriorate or fails to improve. In this person's case, though, despite multiple setbacks, including the need for kidney dialysis and partial amputation of all 4 limbs, the sibling refused to withdraw support on them and asked that we continue to proceed when the patient couldn't speak for themselves. This patient ended up with an extended stay with us, and over the months, the sibling filled the room with photos of their many adventures. This served as inspiration and motivation for the patient to stay strong and look ahead to the next big catch. It also reminded us of the person in the bed. The sibling was also like a cruise ship director and entertainer, full of mischief, and we never knew what was next on the schedule. That helped to keep things a bit lighter when the clouds rolled in and seas got rough. As I looked around the room at all the photos from those various deep-sea fishing adventures, I couldn't help but think that the patient would probably never be able to do those things again, even if they did survive. And then how would they feel? How would I feel if I was in their position? But I saw their determination and the siblings' insistence that they would adapt to whatever challenges they were presented, and I started to question my assumptions. I also found that I was often the lone dissenter on the team during daily discussions of treatment options and possible outcomes, which felt pretty vulnerable. Sometimes I wondered if I'd be thrown overboard. I hung on for dear life and kept at the forefront the patient's and siblings' wishes, despite the rough seas and the grim forecast. I vowed to be their lifeboat and their safe port in the storm. Well, beyond all expectations, the storm parted and the seas calmed. The patient survived and was eventually able to return home. We crossed paths again when they returned to the hospital for some minor outpatient procedures. They thanked me for never giving up on them. They were able to adapt their boat to enable deep-sea fishing again, and they and their sibling were off on more adventures. Through this experience, I had to adapt my once firmly held beliefs about quality of life, life-altering events, and decisions around life and death. Ultimately, the patient, and by extension, their family, are captains of the ship, and I am just part of the crew.